Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode in Conversations in the Future of Work. I am your host, Rachel Cossar, and today we are going to be talking about mastering engaging virtual events, but actually, right? And who other to welcome onto the show than the inimitable John Chen.
Hello, Rachel. So good to see you. How are you doing today?
I'm great, John. Thank you so much for being with us. You're a master when it comes to engaging people virtually, and you have been for many years. I'd love to just pass it over to you to give a brief introduction and whatever you feel is most relevant to share with our audience.
Thank you, Rachel. My name is John Chen. I'm the CEO for Engaging Virtual Meetings. This is my 37th year of meeting online. For those who are a little on the OG side, I was on a service called Prodigy, which was the first graphical based meeting space online long before AOL. And so over the pandemic, I actually was into face to face team building. And then, of course, March of 2020, I had 15 canceled events. And so I'm sitting around my office saying, what am I going to do? I don't make vaccines, but I
Mhm.
do know how to make your virtual meeting better because we had been studying it for years. But the funny part, Rachel, is nobody would buy it before March of 2020. Nobody saw the value of having more
Mm.
engaging virtual meetings until March of 2020. So I put a class up on Eventbrite and over 5,000 people took it. And my publisher came back and said, hey, John, do you want to write your second book? And I did. And the fun part, Rachel, is that my publisher, what I sometimes like to say is the cruelest joke they played on me. They said, hey, John, we don't know how long this coronavirus thing is going to last. So will you rush the book? So I wrote that book in
Wow.
9 weeks, 60,000 words, Rachel. And it came out October 2020 as the #1 Amazon hot new release called Engaging Virtual Meetings. And so the last 3 years has definitely been a journey
Mm.
of putting all these ideas that I had into practice over the last 3 years. And I'm excited to share those not only on the virtual part, but on the hybrid arena too.
Awesome. Well, let's dive in. So first question, and building on what you just shared in your introduction, you've been running virtual events for a while. And so what has obviously, yes, there's been a pandemic. Video has come online as a core channel of communication. But what else have you found really changed over the past few years?
Well, as my good friend Tyler Paris likes to say, 2020 was like grade school and 2023 is like college. And what
Mm.
I mean by that is that you could get away with all sorts of stuff in 2020. You could have terrible backgrounds, crackly mics, all sorts of, scrambly video in 2020. Forget that you're on mute. And for the most part, people were like, oh, it's okay. But here in 2023, now people kind of like private chat each other and they're like, I can't believe the speaker can't figure out how to unmute themselves, right? And
Right.
so the expectations, I think, are much higher. And I think that it's on two arenas too, Rachel. One of the things I've been looking at is we really need a lot of what we can do to make meetings better is just purely can be done without technology. It's how we actually run the meeting. And then the
Yeah.
other half is how we use technology, which Rachel, I know, is a big technology fan. How do we use technology to make our meetings better? And I see both of those.
Mm.
And in my most recent program, Rachel, I actually had those separated. And now I'm really actually starting to combine both of them, like really
Uh,
advanced or high-end engaging non-technical techniques combined with really high-end technical.
I love a number of things you just shared, but the change in expectation, I think, is something that if people don't realize it, they need to, right? Like there was a level of leniency during the pandemic that was required because, I mean, it was so new and
Yeah.
people didn't have a choice. There was no choice. You had to set up your computer in your closet if that's all you had, right? But now, as you said, this channel, some people have really leaned in and become very sophisticated virtual sapiens, as I like to
Yes.
call them. But then a lot of people, mistakenly, I think, continue to think that video is somehow a second class citizen, which couldn't be farther from the truth. So I'm glad you brought that up. And the other component that I think we'll get into more in a moment, but do you find that there's a little bit of an obsession with some of the technology around video when people are sometimes missing that the human skill development piece.
Yeah, although I'd rather them err on the side of some better technology because,
Yeah.
not having the better technology can really hurt you. So here, let me give you one like this right here. Like I got a microphone today and it
Hmm.
sounds simple, but when you meet somebody and it sounds like they're in their bathroom, right?
Yeah.
Because they're using the default mic that's on their laptop,
Hmm.
you got to listen to that for 30 to 60 minutes. As opposed to this, I'm trying to do my best
Radio voice.
NPR voice. That's right. So
Yeah.
at least right then it's pleasing. There's that you don't want technology to hurt you, right?
Right.
And that's one way that I see over and over again where technology hurts people. Then the
Yeah.
second part is I got the chance to meet an author of an article on a PR website about how she really felt like virtual meetings were already broken before the pandemic because they were meetings that were already doing things that were wrong. And the worst part is that just virtual just really magnify it. So there's simple things like have an agenda, right? Greet people when they come in, other things like that.
Hmm.
And then it gets on to like how to really facilitate the meeting. So here's one of my latest principles, Rachel, is this. In your next meeting, allocate at least half of the time for somebody else to talk than you.
Mm.
And it sounds simple, but let me tell you that 80% of the meetings that I attend don't do this.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right? Somebody thinks that because they have the mic and they're their host and they got to talk the whole time,
Yeah.
or as opposed to the inverse is this. If Rachel's in my course and I ask her to answer a question, right? What's changed for you in the past few years, right? When she's answering me, it is impossible for her to be disengaged, right? Because we're having a conversation. It's
Yeah.
impossible for her to be texting somebody else without, violating a
Yeah.
whole bunch of social protocol
Right.
and looking weird, going, why is Rachel texting in the middle of a question when she's on stage?
Right.
So I think that's one of the secrets is getting other people to talk, like actually really facilitating a great conversation as opposed to a one-way presentation that you could
Yeah.
have sent a video for.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And that facilitation skill, I think, is valuable. Is especially valuable on virtual, but it's also just as needed and valuable in person. I think the other thing that I noticed was there's been this like glorification of the in-person meeting, and I'm like, no, people like also hate in-person meetings. Like they're also poorly run. So I think you're right. It's been like almost like a magnifying glass into some of the meeting best practices that we can hone just across the board.
Yeah, I can validate that because I did go to a conference that I was going to speak at, and
Uh-huh.
my speaking slot was at the last day, and so I watched through all the keynotes and all the breakouts, and it just the what my analysis or conclusion at the end of that conference is that in person needs engaging training too.
Totally. 100%. Let's move on to the next question. You've mentioned a few pieces of technology that can really up the ante, right? Like a good webcam, a good microphone. What are some of the surprises when it comes to AI in particular and some of the advances that have happened recently, like AI technology and communication? What has surprised you the most when it comes to the way we've leveraged these tools or the way these tools have come online?
I think the number one is that if it can coach you in the moment, that's we're humans, right? We love the present moment. That if it can coach you in the present moment, that I think you can actually make change.
Mhm.
And this is the best part is when, I'm here in San Francisco, right? And have you heard of the company Waymo yet,
Mhm.
Rachel?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Waymo is Google's deal, which is like self-driving cars all through
Yeah.
San Francisco. And I think that's kind of like, I mean, the fact that they got in this level that the cars are actually driving around a city with real people in it is pretty high. And so let's just take yours, right? Virtual Sapien Sidekick. When you come into it and you run it, right, for a long enough time, it gives you enough feedback to tell you too what mistakes you're making, and then it props you, right, or gives you
Yep.
incentives
Mhm.
to do it right. And I think as humans, the majority of us, again, everyone's wired a little different, but for the most
Mhm.
part, if you reinforce things that people are doing right, then you get rewarded for it and you'll do more of it. And so things like
Yeah.
this, right? Okay, like just I'm in position. This is somebody else's gave me this trick. You take 4 fingers, stick it on top
Uh-huh.
of your head,
Yeah.
and that's how you know where the camera should be, because your eye should be around the third
Right.
level. Again, I should be in the center, and if I moved off to
Yeah.
the frame, I'm going to get feedback and saying, John, where you're leaning off to the side, where are you
Yeah.
going?
Yeah.
And then other parts, that the fact that the technology can know that it's measuring only when I talk. So it can, of course, hear it again. The data is not going anywhere. Rachel's schooled me in all the correct things here. But
Yeah.
that if you take that time to train yourself to look straight at the
Yeah.
camera when you're speaking, not all the time, because otherwise
Mhm.
you'd be like a weirdo, but
Yes.
when you're making key points, all of these things add up. And I do love all of Rachel's um, research and feedback on virtual presence, because I think that, again, you can do things that hurt you, you can do things that help you.
Right.
And I really actually love too, and Rachel, last year, your top tip came from people who vary their tone. Like
Mm.
they should sometimes slow down, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Sometimes they should whisper, right?
Mhm.
Like if you do some of these
Yeah.
vocal tone variations, a lot of presenters were not doing them. And if you could do them, you could easily be in the top set of presenters online.
Yeah. Right. Totally. Absolutely. I mean, and thanks for, referencing so much of the work we do at Virtual Sapiens. But I think you're right that there's a magic almost in technology's ability to be with you in real time. And it's something that, we're never seeking to replace the human coach with our technology, because we think there's so much nuance and power in that form of coaching. But one thing that a human coach can't do is be with you every moment of every call or every presentation or every event, right? And so having technology at your fingertips to democratize some of the access to that kind of real-time feedback is pretty powerful. We'd agree as well.
So you talk about surprising too. I did recently get asked to write a white paper for Meeting Professional International about
Mm,
AI's use in events. And so I
mm,
really have been deep diving over the last time I saw you. And one of the most astounding things too, talk about surprising.
yeah.
And I think it's surprising where people definitely have some reticent part. But there's a company called Render Media,
Mhm,
rendermedia.ai, and they can do something like put you in a studio and they take a digital likeness of you. And then they can
mm,
feed your likeness a script. So now Rachel can actually deliver a perfect script that I wrote, for something. But the
yeah.
key here too then is that it can also create the videos in different languages.
Yeah.
Italian, French, right? Rachel could speak perfect German if she didn't know perfect German,
Right.
because her likeness can do it. And
Right.
so there's a lot of potential, but this definitely, the alarm bells go off for other people. There's a lot of
Right.
concern about digital likeness, and so that's something to keep an eye on over the next year.
Totally. And I'm glad you mentioned that. Like, I think, you mentioned the thing about eye gaze, right? Like training yourself to look into the lens when you're speaking is a virtual communication skill, right? There are like eye gaze redirect features through NVIDIA and a handful of other softwares that I actually think are a little problematic, because what they take away is your ability to decide, like, actually, no, I wanted to give the user a break for a second. I wanted to
Right.
consider what this person said, and instead it'd be like, and like that kind of
Holy.
thing is just creepy to the max. So
Yeah, when technology doesn't represent human things well, and we as
yeah,
humans come back and going, something's weird. What's
yeah,
going on? Right?
right,
That's it sends alarm bells, and then, like I said, then the tech is hurting you, not helping you.
right, 100% uncanny
Yeah.
valley. So let's take. I'd be curious, like, so from your perspective of hosting and training on virtual events today, what do you find is the biggest challenge that people are facing?
In a virtual event, engagement is still the number one problem. Like
Yeah.
I do lots of polls throughout the years, and people are still complaining about engagement and no cameras on
Mhm.
and no one responding when they have questions. And it's so funny that our number one response to that is going, what are you doing as the host of the meeting, as the
Right.
speaker of the meeting?
Right.
To help people feel safe. So, Rachel, I'm pretty sure you've read Google Aristotle's work.
Yep.
So, for those who don't know, Google Aristotle did a great research project you should look up. And Google did research for 18 months on what were all the common factors that are high performing teams. And it's not what you think it is. It's not how much they pay them. It's not the composition of the team. It's not the leader. It's not what building they put them in. It turns out the number one factor, and by the way, read the research for the other four, is psychological safety.
Yeah.
And Rachel and I are big advocates of talking about this, but actually doing it as a presenter is a skill and that you really need to work on. And so I find that ability to change the culture from a camera off to a camera on culture is all about making it feel safe and having people feel safe enough to turn the camera on and contribute to the conversation, as opposed to, I want to hide behind a black wall.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. One thing that we found, talk about surprises for us at Virtual Sapiens, is when people get a little bit of personalized feedback and encouragement and kind of an increased level of comfort and confidence in their skills as a communicator on video, they themselves report that they're more likely to turn their video on.
See? And I think those are the parts that more hosts need to do, and they actually are in control of it, as opposed to blaming the attendee. And I can tell you, I was in another meeting just this week where it was a new platform. I've never seen it before. I logged into the meeting. They were just blabbing away. And the worst part is that they had like a table metaphor for breakout rooms. And everyone was confused about what to do during the breakout. And then the whole thing went camera off. Like when they came back to the main room, everybody turned the cameras off. And so I think that was a missed opportunity from this amazing platform that has the capability to do all these things, that they, wittingly or unwittingly, preference people to turn their camera off. Crazy.
Right. Yeah. No, that's crazy. The other thing that your comment surfaces for me is some of the studies that have been coming out recently about how effective video can be, and whether they're focusing on the effects of Zoom fatigue, overstimulation or understimulation, things like that. What's always so interesting to me is if you read the primary source study, it's very clear that it's not saying that video is not an effective channel of communication. What it is saying is that video is not being used effectively. Yes. And that is the reason that so many people feel disengaged or disconnected or fatigued and exhausted on these poorly run video calls or meetings or events.
Well, Rachel, you'll love this too. I don't know. I'll have to get her full name with the research, but there's a woman, Carmen, I think it's Carmen Simon.
Oh, yeah.
Who spoke at the presentation summit and recently showed her latest research, which they did a sales pitch in all the permutations, like hybrid, in-person, virtual, on a phone. And it turned out that and they're doing like all the biometrics. They're doing eye gaze and they're tracking. It's really amazing research. And they actually found that virtual was the best platform for this particular thing. It was, a sales pitch that was about 10 minutes long. That it drew the most attention to the presenter and the data that they were presenting. And so there are things where virtual can actually be better, and research is just starting to find that out.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'd love to, if that's available, I'd love to take a look at that. Because I think that the keys are like, what is the purpose of this gathering, event, meeting? And then how is the facilitation executed, right? Like what is the engagement like within the event itself, and is it appropriate to the channel, right?
Yes.
So totally. I mean, there's so much more.
Well, I want to add one piece on here too. What do you find the biggest challenge in hosting an engaging hybrid meeting too?
Well, yeah.
That's a place too where I do think the technology now can really hurt or help you.
Yes.
And I recently developed something called hybrid in a box, because one of the top challenges with hybrid is that you need enough equipment that it takes you hours to set it back up somewhere, to move it from your place to somewhere else. So I developed something called hybrid in a box that keeps all the equipment like in a rolling container. It'll fit in an SUV, and that I can actually be up and running in 60 minutes or less from rolling into a venue. And what it gets to that is that I've developed all these things so the presenter can still see the preview of their slides. We can mix it any way we want, not for the virtual audience and for the in-person audience, and that we can actually make a virtual attendee a full member, right? We talked about second-class citizen. That's the other complaint about hybrid, is that often you feel like a second-class citizen because you can't talk, can't be seen.
Yep.
And we reversed all of that and allowed people now where the speaker and the person who's virtual can actually have a full-blown conversation in the middle of a presentation. And so while that does take more technology, I think that's how we solve the biggest challenge in hybrid.
Fascinating. No, that's like a great approach to that, because that is a huge challenge. Let's move on to the final question here. If there's one thing that listeners can do to immediately up their virtual engagement, I know you've given us already some amazing takeaways, but
well, you'll love this, Rachel. Is that we call it the Maven merry-go-round, right? And Maven is 5 letters, and it stands for me, right? What can you do is change yourself, which is either your background or your appearance or your show, dress up, right? Me. A is audio, V is video, I is your illumination, right? And N is network. And so, if you had to change one thing, I mean, if you are on the bad part, I would probably start with network, mainly because like you can't do anything till you get that.
Yep.
Second thing I would change if I had to was your audio. For $50, you can get a mic that is way better than anything that your laptop could ever have, unless you have some kind of amazing laptop, right? So there's a few. There are a few of the Macs I have microphones I actually like, but the majority of them don't. Right? And then after that is your camera. So even this camera, I have a built-in to my laptop, but I'm carrying an external because this camera is better, and it makes a noticeable difference when you can find some of these equipments. So I would give you this though, Rachel. It's like Rachel's seen my home setup too. I'm traveling today. I'm in San Francisco, but when I'm home, I actually have like this crazy setup: 14 screens, right? 3 computers running simultaneously. And I don't tell anybody to try and make that setup, but what I do tell people is I show that setup. So I hope to inspire you to think about what's just one thing that you could do different.
Yeah.
And so hopefully it's one of these, 3 things: your network, your internet, or your audio, and then up to that, your video. I hope that you would think about what could I do to do that? Because I will tell you this, Rachel, every minute you're online, that piece of technology will pay you back.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, on that note, John, thank you so much for being with us, for sharing your incredible, masterful expertise. I mean, tons of takeaways. How can our audience engage with you and your thought leadership and your work directly?
Yeah, come to the website, engagingvirtualmeetings.com. And from there, you can find LinkedIn profile or anything else. I do post regularly about other things. And what I love too, Rachel, of course, has been a guest here at the Engaging Conference this year, October 1st through October 3rd for 2024. But it's every October. And I recommend that you come there because every year we're trying to push the format for what an engaging conference looks like. And Rachel, I'm excited to let you know, this will be the first year we're running a hybrid ourselves.
Wow.
Yes. And if you see, I'm going to preview a bunch of things from now until October of showing people what a really engaging hybrid format can look like. We're going to do that here in Seattle, but you can, again, log in anywhere in the world. And there's even a free ticket for those, who may not have the resources, but we want to get this education to you. So check it out, engagingvirtualmeetings.com/CON for conference, and you can register for a ticket there.
Awesome. Great. Well, that sounds amazing, John. I'll look forward to that. And as always, thank you for the conversation.
Thank you, Rachel. To all the virtual sapiens out there, we want to see you online. See you next time.
Bye-bye.